very warm welcome on Champion of Champions. I'm sitting across a real legend of the game, a man we know very well over in India, and a man who has come to be respected as a World Cup winning captain, Allan. Thank you very much.
Gaurav, thank you very much.
Let me begin by asking you, 87, it's a long time back, almost 25 years ago. You were a younger man then, but wonderful memories?
Oh, look, absolutely outstanding memories for me personally. We'd just come out of some difficult times between, say, 84 and 87. The Australian team had sort of chopped and changed and hadn't had a lot of good positive results. So I've got very great positive memories about 1987 World Cup.
Allan, it was coming to the subcontinent for the first time, but you'd had previous World Cup experiences, 79 and 83, both not going very well. What are your early memories of playing in World Cups and you know, things not going to plan?
Yeah, well, look, I'd started obviously watching the first one, 1975, and a great final played between Australia and West Indies, and that sort of stirred my ambitions to maybe be a part of a World Cup one day. And that dream came true in 1979. I was picked to play for Australia in that particular tournament. It didn't go very well for us. We had a bit of an inexperienced side. A lot of our star players weren't available because they were with World Series cricket and had been banned at that time. So we had players like Greg Chappell and Rod Marsh, Dennis Lillee, etc. Not available for the Australian team at that time. So probably an inexperienced side, and our performances were accordingly. We didn't play very well in 79, but it was a great experience to be a part of such a big event. And then not a dissimilar situation in 1983, even though we had a good full strength side, we're still without a few top line players. Greg Chappell wasn't there, and a couple of other fellas not available because of injury, etc. So once again, our performances weren't up to scratch, and we didn't play particularly well in that World Cup.
You came into the subcontinent for this World Cup. It was co-hosted by India and Pakistan. The fact that you had very hard cricket in the subcontinent just before that World Cup, did that play a good role in the performance that Australia ultimately ended up putting in?
I think most definitely. You know, when I think back on it now, the fact that we were in India in 1986, we played a very good hard test series against a good Indian side.
Yes.
We had some fantastic results, one incredible
test match that nobody can forget.
One test match at Chennai, Madras in those days, which was you know, the ultimate. It was playing a tied test match. It was unheard of. I mean, Australia had been involved in one earlier in 1961, and I'd only seen sort of movie reels of that particular game. But Bob Simpson, our coach, had actually played in that fixture, so he was around to see the second one unfold in Madras. And so it was just, that was an incredible game of cricket, and had a bit of everything, but also it showed that we could compete, and we knew the conditions well in India.
As captain, what role did you see for yourself, and going into this major tournament with a lot of younger players who you'd identified as the future of Australian cricket?
Yeah, look, it was a difficult time, and there was a lot of reasons, no excuses, but some reasons why we hadn't performed well. We had a host of great players retire, you know, simultaneously. I'm talking about Dennis Lillee, Greg Chappell, Rod Marsh, but there was a host of other very good quality players that had retired, you know, over the previous sort of 18 months. And then we had a rebel tour of South Africa, which took a lot of high quality cricketers out of our system. So we were left with a very young core group of players that were learning their craft at international level, and it's a tough ask at times. And I was a pretty senior player when I took over the captaincy, but albeit of a very young side, and we struggled to get the results. And it was a difficult time because there's high expectation on Australian cricket teams to perform well and to win matches, etc. And so we went through some difficult times, and there was a lot of chopping and changing of the team, and finally we started to work out that it was best to identify our best young players and stick with these guys through thick and thin, and trying to sort of establish some team spirit, some harmony, and just the knowledge that these young guys, given the exposure to international cricket, would start performing. So that was very evident through sort of that 86 tour of India, then leading into the World Cup. Young, unheralded cricket team, but
Yes.
the guys, you know, internally we knew that we had an outside chance if we played anywhere near our best.
You mentioned the young guys. It's worth naming them. They went on to become stars of Australian cricket. Some of them went on to become legends of the world game. Steve Waugh, David Boone in there, Jeff Marsh, Craig McDermott. What was it that forced the selectors and yourself to say that, you know, this is the group that we will stick by with, thick or thin? What was that? Did you see a special spark?
Yeah, well, I think there was a process of elimination in that the previous couple of years, say between 84 and 87 or 86, say, there'd been a lot of chopping and changing of personnel within the team, and it was very difficult to get any cohesion in the team. And I honestly believe the selectors sat down and started to think, you know, look, we've just got to identify who our good young players are and stick with them, not having them look over their shoulders, you know, waiting for the selector's axe to fall on their head, you know, because of a few poor performances. So just stick with them, and if you've got a gut feel about the quality youngsters. There was obviously not a lot of background performance to go with it, but you just sometimes get a bit of a gut feel about who should, you know, and who will be a good international cricketer given some time and exposure. So I think that was the process that the selectors started to put into practice as far as selecting Australian cricket teams. And we started to get a core group, and those players you talked about, you know, Stephen Waugh and Craig McDermott, you know, David Boone, Jeff Marsh, Dean Jones. We had Bruce Reid, who was a very talented fast bowler for us. We had a core group of you know, good young cricketers, and you know, barring injury, etc., you know, try and keep these guys together. And our performances started to improve, particularly in one-day game. That's where we started to really see an improvement. Hadn't converted into the Test match arena quite at that point, but certainly those players were coming through the ranks.
Okay, so now we start the World Cup, and we have a cracker of a start against the home team. And that's a game that you think played a very important role in what ultimately ended up being the result that Australia got, because you got a good start against a good team and you came through a difficult situation.
Oh, look, it was just the most magnificent start to the tournament you can imagine. We'd arrived in Madras, Chennai, about probably a week, 10 days before the tournament started, so we had fantastic preparation leading into the tournament. We get used to the weather conditions because, as you know, it's very hot and sticky in that part of the world at time of the year. So it was just a fantastic preparation to be there. We knew our first two games were in Madras, so we had just the best possible preparation. We worked hard, as I talked about the work ethic and the fielding drills, and everything about our preparation was spot on. So playing India, you know, the host nation, in the very first game was going to be a real test of our mettle. And we'd settled on some pretty basic game plans. We decided that what suited us best was if we won the toss, we would bat first, and invariably a lot of teams like to chase in those days, so we found ourselves batting first in majority of contests, so that suited us from our game plan point of view. The batting side of things, we expected the top three, if not four, to do the bulk of the batting. It's not you know, it's not rocket science, but it was really much part of our game plan structure to really put the pressure on the top three to do the bulk of the batting, have wickets in hand for the final 10 overs. You know, all those things that we've heard time and time again over history. But up until that point, we didn't really have a real structure about where we'd wanted to be after 15 overs, where we'd like to be after 20 overs, 30 overs, etc. And we had some structure to our process, and the theory was to set the score, then try and defend it. That particular game, we had a very interesting situation. We ended up with a score of 270, but there is a story to that. Probably 3/4 of the way through our batting innings, Dean Jones hit a high ball over Ravi Shastri's head at, I think it was long on, and the ball actually bounced this far over the rope. Well, I think it was just a line in those days on the outfield, about so far, and it was right in front of us. We were sitting in the change rooms, and we could see it was 6. But Dickie Bird was the umpire, and Ravi Shastri wasn't sure what had happened because it had gone over his head and he'd missed the catch. So 4 was signalled, and Dean Jones sort of complained to Dickie Bird, and of course we as the spectators watching on were sort of complaining as well that it was actually 6, but Dickie Bird now said, look, he'll stick with 4 and he'll check out what actually happened later on. So subsequently at the change of our innings, we were on 268.
Right.
And Dean Jones, our manager Allan Crompton with Dickie Bird went to see the match referee, who happened to be, I think it was Hanif Mohammed, in that very first game. And Hanif had actually, from his vantage point, seen that yes, the ball had gone over the rope, so our score was adjusted accordingly to 270. And history will show you that the gods were smiling on us, because India in their run chase made 269 and we won by 1 run.
The road to the semi-finals, it was a competition that involved you playing the other 3 teams twice in the competition.
Yes.
Which meant that you had to acquire a certain number of points to make sure you get into the semi-finals. Do you remember any roadblocks going into that semi-final, or was that road after that first win quite smooth?
No, we had a couple of very good contests against New Zealand in particular. They had a pretty good team themselves, and they were in our half of the draw. And there was one particular game that got rain affected, where we made, in a rain affected game, about 199, and New Zealand looked like winning. But it's just amazing how, we talk about cricketing gods or whatever it might be. As luck would have it, we got a couple of run outs just through good fielding, and then I think Jeff Marsh took a fantastic catch in the deep to dismiss Martin Crowe, who looked like he was batting very well, looked like he was going to win the game for New Zealand. And then it's amazing how the momentum switches, and we win a game that we mightn't have won in other circumstances. But I just remember that game in particular, that it could have gone the other way, and then it might have killed off our momentum. New Zealand might have got a bit of a leapfrog out of that. And the other team in our group was Zimbabwe, which were unheralded side, but as we knew from 1983, where they beat us in a World Cup match, that they had a lot of good cricketers, Kevin Curran and Tricos, Davey Houghton, Rawson, Shah, some very good cricketers, unheralded, but you couldn't take them lightly. So we had some close encounters, particularly with New Zealand, some tight battles against Zimbabwe. India beat us convincingly in one of the games. I think it was in Delhi, where they amassed a big score, 280 odd, and we didn't chase down very well. So it was the first game and only game of the tournament that we didn't bat first. And so that confirmed to us that we were better setting a score rather than chasing a score. And but overall, the road to the semi-finals was pretty good. We had good momentum. We'd lost the game to India, which gives you a good wake-up call. But we finished on the same points as India leading into the semi-finals. So I suppose first part of the equation was completed. We'd got through, and it's not necessarily surprised ourselves, but maybe surprised quite a few that we find ourselves into the semi-finals.
Reading about the time, among the comments that were made about Australia being a club side was made by Zahir Abbas, and you're just supposed to go to Pakistan, get rolled over, and allow them to come into the final at the Eden Gardens. But is your memory of the game, going into the game, similar of this feeling of almost being under siege in a country that was expecting now to win the World Cup?
Not necessarily, because it's an amazing thing when you're just rank underdogs. You can sort of fly under the radar a little bit, and I think there was just the expectation that Pakistan, who had a tremendous side put together, Imran Khan, one of the great captains that we've seen, that he'd amassed a very, very good side under his leadership. And playing in Pakistan, in Lahore, a very hostile sort of environment to play in, there was not much expected of us, except from ourselves, because we had been on a bit of a roll ourselves. We felt like we were going to be very competitive. We knew we were going to be up against it, against a very good Pakistan side, but hey, we're the underdogs. We haven't got as much to lose as the opposition, so we just keep doing the stuff that we've been doing well, and that is, all the little things, the top three doing the bulk of the batting, the bowlers just bowling nice and steady. Everyone knew their roles. We were a very good fielding side. We weren't dropping catches. We were taking run-out opportunities. Do all those little things well, we fancied our chances, and it was another one of those really good contests. There was moments in the game that can sort of go one way or the other. Imran Khan himself bowled a fantastic spell of bowling towards the end of the innings, but I can distinctly remember Steve Waugh hitting 2 or 3 sixes, maybe 18, 20 runs off the penultimate over, which sort of springboarded our score from reasonable to very, very good, into the high 260s. So all of a sudden we had a very competitive total on the board, and something that, going into the half-time break, we fancied our chances that if we bowled anywhere near our best and we fielded like we had been, we're a big chance.
In fact, that score of 260 odd that Australia did finally end up putting on the board was at the time considered to be quite a good score in one-day cricket, and you must have felt at that point that the way you've been playing cricket so far in the World Cup, this result could now go in your favour.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, you look at the scoring rates in international one-day cricket now, particularly in the subcontinent. Now, if you don't make 280 plus, I mean, you're going to struggle, and you see scores well in excess of 300 posted or even chased down in today's cricket. So, the modern-day cricketer is a stronger, fitter beast, and hit the ball incredibly hard now. The outfields are very quick. The boundaries have been brought in marginally. So, all those factors, the scoring is a lot higher. But back in 1987, 260 plus was a very good score. So, as I said, we were quietly confident going into the bowling side of that game.
Just looking at the scorecard and memories that you might want to rekindle, early wickets again for Australia. You got them 3 down before 40, but then Javed and Imran start to put a partnership together. What's the thinking then?
Yeah, well, they were the danger too, weren't they? I mean, having taken early wickets, it gives you a huge momentum. The confidence is high. We were fielding and bowling very well, but all of a sudden, those two, they're a dynamic duo, weren't they? Javed Miandad, just a master of the one-day game, just working the ball in the gaps and keeping the score ticking over without ever appearing to be, smashing the ball all over the place. And his partner in crime, Imran, he played a fantastic captain's knock, and he was just knocking the ball around, and they were starting to get a really good partnership together and keeping them in the game. The scoring rate was quick enough just to not balloon out past 5.5, 6 runs and over, which in that period was about where you didn't want it to get past. Once you started to chase 6.5, 7, 8 runs and over, it became a difficult task. So yeah, they kept them in the game quite incredibly. So we were chopping and changing the bowlers around. It was one of those situations where you're trying to sort of come up with the right formula, just because we knew if we got a breakthrough, we would sort of more than likely go on to win the game. But getting one or both of them out was the hard thing.
The breakthrough came from the lethal left arm spin of Allan Border, and you were going to go on and do more incredible things with the ball, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But is it among the more prized wickets in international cricket, the fact that you got Imran Khan out?
Well, I think so. I mean, I didn't rate my own bowling very highly, but it was one of those situations in the game where I think Tim May was our spin bowler at the time, and he was getting a bit of stick from the batsmen. I think both Javed and Imran are tremendous players of spin bowling, so they were knocking the ball around with ease, and I just felt there was a need for a change. So of course, I was the spare parts bowler at that time, and so begrudgingly I decided to have a bowl myself, and it was in the very first over, if memory serves me right, that I got Imran in my mind just to edge one to our keeper.
And he claims that he was not out, that it was Dickie Bird who gave the wrong decision at the time, and he said he wasn't out at all.
Yeah, well, look, from my point of view, I mean, you heard something, there was a big noise, and you know, it was just, you know, a huge moment in the game for us, and Dickie Bird ruled in our favour. But if Imran says he doesn't hit it, well, he's a very honest man. I'll take his word for that. But that happens in cricket. It was a huge moment in the game, that's for sure. And of course, from that point on, we started to grab the ascendancy,
Yes.
and wickets started to tumble.
And just touch upon the spell that Craig McDermott bowled, because that was the best spell of the World Cup in terms of wickets taken, 5 wickets in that semi-final, and a very important spell because he made sure that the game finished in your favour.
Yeah, well, what would happen with Craig, we had a certain role for him to play. Generally, he'd bowl about 5 overs to start the innings off with a new ball, because he was very good at moving the ball around, bowled very good outswingers at the time, and he got us a couple of early wickets, which was just absolutely fantastic. But I kept him out of the attack because he was used then to bowl towards the end of a one-day game, generally the last 5 overs. Sometimes we'd use him differently depending on how the game was going, but generally those last few overs, and he basically came back with the old ball on this occasion and bowled brilliantly well again, and I think he ended up with 5 for 40 odd, got those last crucial wickets, and all of a sudden we were in the final. You know, we just couldn't believe it. You know, very euphoric situation, because you're playing in a hostile environment, Lahore Stadium, and it's like almost in silence that you're winning this cricket match. But we're sort of yahooing and carrying on and jumping around with the knowledge that we're in the World Cup final. You know, this is just the most amazing thing, and we did it, I suppose, against the odds, given that we weren't expected to go that far, and to actually win our semi-final in Lahore was a huge moment.
Beating a team like Pakistan, one of the pre-tournament favourites, on their home patch, does that make you that much more confident going into a final contest?
Look, you sort of got to the point where, look, there's one game to go. We're in the final. We can, with the way we're playing, we can win this. There was no doubt that there was a, you know, we weren't cocky, but there was a confidence, a growing confidence amongst the young group that we were playing well enough to win. From memory, we then we sat down and watched the other semi-final, which was between India and England.
Quietly rooting for England?
And I think we probably were, because we felt India would be a tougher assignment at home. Playing in Calcutta against an Indian team would be a tough assignment.
Yes.
So I suppose you sort of, we're in the final, so whoever we play, you work out what you've got to do. But yeah, I suppose there was a sneaking suspicion from us that who would you rather prefer to play? Maybe it was England, but they were a very good cricket team too, and they had Graham Gooch, who was just in superb touch, and probably he won that semi-final for England off his own bat. I mean, I remember he was on a bit of a sweeping mission.
Yes.
Because the ball was turning a bit, but he just kept sweep, and they end up chasing down a good score, and we knew our opposition for the final. It was England.
You go to one of the great grounds in the world and build up towards this final, mini Ashes in a sense, against England. But does that play a role now? All of these young guys suddenly arrive at this moment in their careers where they're playing a World Cup final at one of the great grounds of the world against the old enemy? Yeah,
well, look, I had played there previously, but I don't think many of the other boys had experienced Eden Gardens and the atmosphere that is created at that place. It is intimidating to a certain degree, and it would be more so if you're playing India there. But on this occasion, we're playing England. We're quietly confident, but the crowd and all the build-up and the passion that the Indian public had for that game, all of a sudden they were going for us. They were supporting the Australian cricket team at Eden Gardens. So it was almost like playing a home game for us. I mean, it was quite an incredible atmosphere. It's just a brilliant stadium. And what could be really daunting if you were playing India, for instance, became almost the opposite. It was like playing in front of a great crowd at the MCG. It was just, you know, it's a huge coliseum. and maybe there was a few English supporters there, but they got drowned out in the noise created, and we were the home side. So it was a great sort of occasion for us, and I don't think we panicked in the face of that particular game. It was, we're in the final, we had as good a chance as anyone. We had the same tactics unfolded in that we batted first,
yes,
and so that was our preferred option. The top three did a brilliant job again. I toyed with the idea of what I'd unleashed in that final was a little bit unusual in that we had a pinch hitter.
Yes.
Craig McDermott went in and had a bit of a slog for, he lasted a couple of overs, and then the rest of the batting sort of finished off the score. I think it was in the 250s.
Yes, you made about 250. You had a good partnership yourself with Mike Valletta, I think.
Yeah, well, Mike Valletta became a bit of an unsung hero. He'd played a couple of telling knocks towards the tail end of the tournament, and he made a good 40-odd, I think it was, against
yes.
Pakistan, and then in the final did a similar role where he, better than run a ball just with his little dinks and nudges here and there. He was one of those guys that didn't bludgeon the ball all over the place, but just worked the ball into gaps, and he played a very important role in building our score up to a sort of a pass mark, I would say, on the conditions we were confronted with. 250 was about what you needed to be in the game.
Just talk a little bit, Allan, about the role played by David Boone. He ended up being man of the match in the final, but he and Jeff Marsh had played an important. That was a role you'd earmarked for them as an opening pair, and David Boone, another young player at the time,
yes,
was delivering on that promise.
Well, that's, we talked about game plans, and each individual sort of knew their role pretty much, and it was sort of really part of our go was that the top 2, 3 would do the bulk of the batting. We tried to be none one down after 15 overs,
right,
round about 50 runs. I know it sounds, underwhelming in the current game plan, but at the time it really worked well for us. And so in other words, Marsh and Boone had formed a really good, they're tight buddies, but they became, instrumental in our success because invariably one of them would go on to make a sizable contribution in a game. And when you can have one of your opening batsmen, and then Dean Jones, who had a tremendous tournament as well, who's scoring heavily, it's very easy to bat round someone making score at the top of the order. And invariably when you're batting first, you want to make sure you set the game up by setting a good total. And that's exactly what our game plan was throughout. We didn't really miss out in many games at all. We always posted somewhere around what we thought was pass mark or better on the back of the top 3. So Marsh, Boone and Jones were the big 3 contributors, and then the rest of us chipped in obviously from time to time, but the game plan from the batting side of things couldn't have been better.
Yeah, and it seemed like you had a game plan with your spin bowling as well, because suddenly there's England going quite well, your opposite number batting quite well, and you come in to bowl and he decides to play a reverse sweep. In the history of silly shots in world cricket, was that number 1 at the time?
Well, I keep reminding Mr. Gatting about that particular shot every time I see him, and every time he sees me, he bows his head and he can't believe it. But look, he was playing incredibly well. Yes, he'd decided to take on our spinner, who was Tim May, and he hit a couple of boundaries and a couple of sixes down the ground, and all of a sudden the game was starting to drift away from us as far as momentum was concerned.
And so you introduced the
again,
secret weapon.
It was one of those sort of decisions, it looks like I'm going to have a bowl. So look, it was begrudging that I come on once again. I didn't rate myself that highly, but I knew I could sort of land them around about the mark, and I thought it might be one of those situations where Gat would be so petrified of getting out to me that he might just play a few overs out, and then we would sort of maybe make a bowling change and see what happened from there. So I set a field, very strong onside field, so that I had 5 on the onside. So he probably had an idea, okay, I'm going to try and bowl in pretty tight to his pads, which was what I was thinking as well. So I don't know how well he played the reverse sweep in the past. He reckons that it was a shot that he played well in county cricket and other games, that he'd sort of perfected it.
But not in a World Cup final.
But World Cup final. But unluckily for him, I was so intent on bowling the ball, say, into his pads, and it was my first ball, so I was a bit stiff, and I dragged the ball about this wide of leg stump. So it makes it even harder to play that reverse sweep to that delivery. So fortunately for him, he got a glove up onto his shoulder, went straight up in the air, and Greg Dyer took a catch as the wicketkeeper, and we had this massive, huge breakthrough. So that was if you talk about sort of key moments in sporting contests, and that being a World Cup final, that goes down as number one.
Because two captains dismissed by Allan Border's lethal left arm spin, semi-final and final. You know, you don't rate yourself as a bowler, you say, but you've achieved certain things with the ball that, looking back, you must be very proud of.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I suppose like everyone else in international cricket, we bowl in the nets and you fool around, and over time you become proficient enough to be able to come on and bowl in Test cricket or one-day cricket, and you know you're going to land most balls okay. Invariably, it's like in all games of cricket, sometimes that change to the part-time bowler works a treat, doesn't it? You see it time and time again in Test matches where the frontline bowlers are struggling to get a breakthrough, and the part-time bowler comes on, and I don't know whether there's a relaxation from the batsman or what happens. It's invariably the case. So, yeah, from my own point of view, a lot of people have said, "Oh, you should have bowled more, Allan," but it was when you're the captain, you always look at the other options as being, the way you should go. And I was a reluctant sort of bowler, but had some success at times.
The game then moves on towards its finish, and you're well ahead in the game. By the time McDermott runs into bowl the last over, you're pretty confident the World Cup's in the bag?
Yes, by then I thought, barring some miracle, but at the previous couple of overs, Phil de Freitas had come in and started to hit. He hit a couple of fours and a big six up into the mid-wicket area, and all of a sudden, there was a bit of a mood swing, if you like, as far as us starting to get maybe the wobbles on, and the fact that maybe Phil de Freitas might be able to pinch the game from us, but we were bowling at their tail. I think Neil Foster was in as well. But so I think that it was just a mountain too high to climb at that point. So we were confident, barring, say, wides or no balls, as long as we bowled full at the stumps and, nothing untoward happened, that the game was ours. But you always still, there's always those thoughts that creep in that, the game might get pinched from you for some unknown reason. But we were pretty pumped at the time that the job was just about to be completed, and Craig McDermott, in great form, was going to finish the job for us.
Allan, of all the things you achieved in the game, how do you look at the memory of lifting the World Cup at the Eden Gardens in 1987 as this captain of this unheralded club side?
Yes.
And winning the World Cup for your country for the very first time?
Yeah, look, it's in the grand final as one of my special moments, because up until that point we hadn't had a lot of success, and then to all of a sudden win the World Cup, and at that stadium where the fireworks were going off. It was in the early evening, and we'd just been presented with the trophy, and did a bit of a lap of honour around the ground, and the crowd were really embracing the fact that the underdog had won this tournament. It's the most incredible feeling, and obviously the aftermath was brilliant. In the dressing rooms, great celebrations, and to the credit, the England boys all came in to congratulate us on winning the World Cup, which it's not an easy thing to do when you're the loser in those sort of situations. So you've got to take your hat off to the losing team, being England, to make the effort to come in and say well done. And of course the celebrations didn't stop for some time afterwards.
Was it an extremely significant moment in the history of Australian cricket, or at least in the modern history of Australian cricket? What did it achieve for the game in Australia?
Oh, look, it was the turning point. There's no doubt that we'd had these 3 years where we'd struggled to get our best possible results, and all of a sudden there was a sense of belief within the group that all of a sudden, we started to, yes, believe that we could compete with the best cricket teams in the world at that time.
And just looking ahead to this World Cup, who would you pick as your favourite teams?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I believe this World Cup is going to be one of the most open that we've seen for quite a few years. To me, there's no clear favourite, because on any given day, all the sides have shown in the last 3 or 4 years that they can beat each other. Obviously, the host countries are going to be hard to beat, and I talk about India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka in particular. Bangladesh could provide some surprises, but obviously the South Africans are a very, very good competitive cricket team. And England have shown that they are becoming a great force, having won the 2020 World Cup recently. So, and obviously, look, don't underestimate Australia's chances. So, look, I reckon the big six will still be in vogue. I'd be very surprised if the winner comes from outside that group. But yeah, clear favourite. I couldn't honestly say one.
What do you make of Australia's chances? The fact that they're on a hat-trick of World Cup wins, and all of a sudden you have this situation where the team's in a bit of a decline, or at least hasn't got the same dominant power that it earlier had.
Yeah, that's a fair comment, but that's been more in Test arena. In the one-day arena, I think our performances have still stacked up pretty favourably. I think we're still rated the #1 team in the world. And we know the conditions in India well, having visited your shores many times over the past 4 years. So,
and won World Cups over there.
And won World Cups in India. But yeah, slightly different personnel from previous campaigns, but you'll see some familiar faces as well. So I still think we're going to be one of the favoured sides without being a clear favourite because of that experience. We're still going to put on the field a very good competitive cricket team. And a lot will depend on guys like Sean Tate and Brett Lee, whether he gets picked, and how they just start performing as a unit. But if they get a bit of momentum, yeah, look out, the Aussies could be hard to beat.
All right, so I'm going to get you a final comment now. Who do you pick as your World Cup finalists and favourites at the end of it? If you've got to sort of be a soothsayer.
Yeah, soothsayer. Look, what I'd like to see, I'd love to see an Australia versus India final. I think that would bring the house down, wouldn't it? It'd be just fever pitch. Two very competitive rivals. We've had a rivalry that's spanned back so many years now, so many great contests, both here in Australia and in India. That would be some final. I'd like to watch those two go at it.
All right, we'll hold you true to your word. We'll be following the World Cup with you, but thank you very much, Allan, for sharing those memories.
I'm very much looking forward to the World Cup, and it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Allan.